Hello and welcome to this week's quick video. I'm Russ. I'm the host of the Family Business Podcast, and this week I have been speaking to a lady called Doris Scheibenbogen from Munich in Germany. Now, Doris works both in and with family businesses to help them to grow, but also to help them to avoid conflict. So the topic of this week's Family Business Podcast is conflict within the family business. And the idea of this video is just to give you a couple of minutes of overview of what the episode covers and some of the key points that Doris raises during our conversations. Now, the first one to highlight is that Doris uses something called intuitive conflict resolution. And what she means by that is very often it is an emotional and intuitive answer that is the solution to conflict. It's not always a logical one, and yet people might present logical arguments that lead to conflict, and she sort of summarizes this with the phrase, "You know the truth by the way it feels." And we go into a lot more detail as to what that actually means during the show. And she also gives some really good tips on how to set the business up in a way that ideally avoids unhealthy conflict. There is healthy conflict, and that's a good thing. We'll come on to that a little bit later on. But in order to help avoid unhealthy conflict, one of the things that businesses can do is to make sure that they are structured correctly, so that they are built on and the culture of the family is understood fully by all those involved. That way you have a common goal, a common aspiration, and hopefully that should start to help alleviate some tensions and perhaps give some clarity on what people are trying to do. And to build on that, Doris recommends having absolute clarity over the roles that people have within the business. Now, the reason this is important is because you then don't get older brother or younger sister or vice versa stepping on each other's toes, because they know their roles, it's clearly defined and it's been communicated. And that leads on to the third and possibly most important tip that Doris gives, and that is to have good communication, to have open and honest conversations with people and express how you are feeling. Now, Doris has lots of experience working within family businesses, and she draws on this to come to a conclusion that perhaps women within family businesses are far better at articulating their emotions, expressing it and discussing it than their male counterparts. And whilst that's potentially a sweeping generalisation, I don't necessarily disagree with it. Doris talks about a book by Grayson Perry who is called The Descent of Man, and in that book he talks about exactly this. Men should be able to express their feelings and their concerns far more openly than the vast majority do. She recommends that as a read. I haven't read it, but I'm going to go away and order it on Amazon now and have a read of that. And the conclusion from that part of it is it's actually okay to open up and be honest about how we're feeling. It might help avoid conflict further down the line. As we mentioned earlier on, not all conflict is bad necessarily. Healthy conflict helps us to grow, it challenges us, it helps the business to adapt and to take on new ideas. But if it does tip over into that point where you don't think there's any resolution, then you have the option of calling somebody like Doris to come in and help resolve it, or you end up calling the lawyers, and it doesn't necessarily end particularly well there. So that's a brief summary of the show. The link to listen to the podcast is in the section below, so go and have a look at that. If you want to subscribe to this channel to get updates every week on what we're doing, the idea is to record these videos at the end of each recording of the episode, so it's fresh in my mind. I can then express to you what the key points for the podcast are. If it's something that sounds of interest, you can then go off and listen to the podcast and get the full interview. Hope you've enjoyed it. If you're enjoying the iTunes show, the podcast itself, please leave us a review. It helps us become discovered by more and more people, and that would be great. And do get in touch. Until next week.